Good morning, everyone. I'm just going to wait for another 30 seconds for the other people to join, and then we can start. All right, let's kick it off. So, good morning, everyone. My name is Wim, and I'm the studio director at IO. And I want to start by thanking you all for giving up 60 minutes of your morning for a webinar about content of all things. The weather isn't great. It's raining currently. It's the first time in a week, I think, especially in Belgium. So it's an ideal moment to just follow this webinar. Just a quick thing about myself. I have over 15 years of experience in brand management, social media, content marketing, and visual storytelling. I worked for clients such as MediaMarkt, Audi, McDonald's, Vastplus, Bank van Breda, De Koning, Quickstep, De Wale Vastgoed, and so forth. This is not a bragging list, but I want to make clear that I've created content and campaigns for both B2C and B2B clients, enterprise-sized, but also SMEs. And that's what I'm about to tell you in the upcoming slides is applicable to all of these type of companies. And yes, I'm also the very proud dad of Barry. Barry is the puck. Barry is our office dog. Barry does not care about brand guardrails or brand management, but we love him anyway because he's an awesome dog. Now, here's how the next 60 minutes are going to be structured. We start with the control problem. In this part, we take a look at some of the pitfalls you first encounter when you properly want to scale some of your content with AI. I will repeat myself a few times during this first part, but that's because I want to get the message very clear. And I hope some of you recognize the same pitfalls when scaling your content or when trying to scale your content with AI. In the second part, we'll get into building the system. Here we'll talk about the workflows, the models you need to implement before you actually produce the content. This will mostly be theory, as we do not have the time to really work out a workflow in detail. But this should give you a clear idea of the steps you need to take before you start producing content. Now, the third part, we'll look at 3 use cases. For some of the brands we've worked for in the past, let's say 6 months, I will show you high level how we make the content after the workflows have been defined. This can get a bit technical, just as a word of warning. And we close with, what I think the creative team of the future is going to look like. What does this all mean for the people who are doing the work? Probably also some of you who are currently watching. Also, because we only have 60 minutes, I will need to gloss over some things. And unfortunately, I won't be able to go too much in detail in some things. If you still have questions, don't hesitate to ask them in the chat during the presentation. And I will try and do my utter best to answer them at the end of this session. So 60 minutes, 4 chapters, let's go. The question I really want to start with today is one you have probably asked yourself at some point. That is, well, how do I produce content, more content, faster, without losing quality, without losing consistency, or without losing the story? Because these two things, more and better, it feels like they should go together, and in practice, they often do not. And let me paint a picture that will probably feel familiar for some of you. You have a campaign, and you start with a campaign idea. And with that campaign comes a brief. And then you need to start figuring out on what channels you will run that campaign. And every channel also need their own formats. And then every channel has their own audiences. And every audiences, they have the preference for a certain type of format. And then, of course, you have the looming deadlines and the loom around the corner. They need to be respected, but they also can be a source of stress. And if that wasn't enough, everything needs to be approved upon by the stakeholders, who just might disprove the whole thing you just came up with and then make you start again from scratch. And before you know it, you completely lost track of what your original campaign was supposed to look like. Now, each one of those words represents a set of decisions, a set of assets, a set of people with opinions. And you can quickly lose the original plot from your original campaign. Also, I think once you've worked out the strategy part, you need to move on to the tactical part. And those are social posts. And you also need paid ads, you need banners, you need emails, you need landing pages, you need probably some video because we're 2026 and you can't forget about video. You need to localize assets if you're in a multi-country company. You need some A/B variants to test things. Then the sales team come knocking at your door because they need their sales assets. And once the campaign has been launched, you go into an always-on content strategy and so forth and so forth and so forth. And every single thing on this slide is just one campaign. I think most brands are running multiple campaigns simultaneously, plus always-on content, plus reactive content, plus internal communications, and so forth, and so forth, and so forth. And now I need to take a breather because if you're feeling slightly exhausted just looking at this list, you're not alone. This is the reality most content teams live in every single day. And that is exactly why AI starts to look very attractive to most of us, of course. And here's the question that I believe runs through every marketer's head the first time they either watch an incredible, impressive video of an influencer made with AI, or they figure out they can generate weeks worth of content by using AI in just about 4 minutes. Now, if content can be made faster, why can't we have more of it? And I think that's a completely logical question. And the answer is you can, fortunately, but it comes with a catch. And it's a fairly significant catch. And that's the catch I will actually talk about today. So this was the first part of the introduction. Why is that important and why is it a catch? Because speed is not the same as control. AI generates content quickly, reliably, at scale, if done well. What AI does not do automatically is protect your brand, your tone of voice, your campaign idea, your product's accuracy, or your creative standards per se. It produces output. And whether that output is actually good for your brand, that's a completely separate question. And someone on your team, or perhaps yourself, you still need to answer it every single time. So let's try to reframe the problem a little bit. Volume is not really the challenge. I think most teams, most people can already produce more content. And there's definitely enough AI services popping up that make that same promise. If they really actually manage to do it, that's an entirely different question, but they make that promise. The real question is, can you produce more content that is still good, still consistent, still recognizably yours? And I think you need to ask yourself the question, can your audience look at a piece of content from, let's say, 6 months ago and one from today and feel, without looking at your logo, that they still come from the same brand? Because when we start scaling content without a system, there's a couple of things we can run into. First thing is everything starts to look the same, and that's not in a good way, because you will start producing the same type of content your competitor also makes. Second is that reviews actually start taking longer than production, which kind of somewhat defeats the purpose of using AI to create your content. The original campaign idea from my first slide, that gets diluted somewhere between the brief and, I don't know, the 10th, 12th, 11th, 14th localized adaptation. And your team, instead of doing creative, impactful work, they spend most of its time correcting things that should never have been wrong in the first place. And if that sounds familiar, you probably know what my next slide will be. That's suddenly things can become to start very expensive, very fast. Not only in man hours, but also definitely because of the AI cost, which, by the way, currently is still being sold by all the major players at an extreme loss. So we can really expect that these costs will start to rise very quickly. So scaling content without a system doesn't just cost you brand consistency, it actually costs you real money. And a quality problem in 10 pieces of content, well, that's annoying because that's a day of work. A quality problem across 1,000 pieces of content, you can call that a crisis. And that's exactly the thing we will try to avoid in the next slides coming up. Now, because we want to move time in production, we often want to dive straight into it. But the first thing you need to do is you need to properly set out a workflow. And the workflow is a thing we will discuss in the second part of this presentation. But why do you need to introduce that workflow? Because if you do not introduce a workflow, you suddenly need to spend more time and more effort on other parts of the process. And everything reappears downstream the further you go. So first you need to triple check if everything is on brand. Does the content I created with AI, does it use the right colors? Is the legal in order? Are there any text or typos within my content that aren't according to my needs? If it's not correct, you need to start rewriting your prompts. Then you need to start correcting the new mistakes it will generate because you didn't have a correct workflow in order. This forces you to write out a new brief because you need to work around the problem instead of solving it, which means you start rejecting the original campaign idea from my first slide, and then you need to come up with a new one. And that needs to be realigned with the stakeholders, with your team, to bring them again up to speed. And that's how you get into this continuous loop, which will cost you, again, lots of money and time. If you start to notice a pattern here, that's the pattern. So the question I get asked the most, without a doubt, to solve this is, well, Wim, just tell me what AI tool should I use? And I'm sure some of you registered for this webinar with probably the same question. Just tell me which tool is the best tool I can use. But it's actually not the right question. The right question is, what content system do we need? And the tool, that's a component. And the system is what makes the tool work. And right now, I believe that most brands have invested in tools and perhaps in educating their people to use those tools, but they have not yet built a system whatsoever around them. So before you start to do that, there's 5 questions you need to ask yourself. And there's perhaps only 3 or 4, if I'm really honest, slides you really need to remember after this presentation. And this is one of those slides. So before you pick a single tool, answer these 5 questions. First one is, what should be created? And perhaps more importantly, what shouldn't be created? Second question you need to ask yourself is, okay, what stays consistent across everything? Is it perhaps a legal text? Is it perhaps a template? I don't know. Is it perhaps the logo that needs to stay consistent in a certain corner of your image or your content editorial? I don't know. Third question is, what can be adapted and by whom? Because perhaps some of you have also companies or offices in other parts of the country or in different countries who have their own local marketing teams. So who needs to adapt what type of content and how are they going to do that? Fourth one is, what needs human approval before it goes live? Not every content needs it. Some important campaigns, some important content pieces really do need human approval before you can get it to go live. That takes time. And this one really matters, is what should never be automated at all, because it's not because we can do it that we need to do it. So if you can answer those 5 questions honestly, you have built the foundation for our content system, which we will be talking about. If you skip these 5 questions, well, you end up with a very expensive subscription, which will become even more expensive in the future for a tool you're probably not using correctly. I'm sorry if I sound harsh, but this is how I view it, and this is what we learned in the past 2 or 3 years by using all of these tools. Well, that's all fine and dandy, Wim, but just tell me if we know our issues and what questions we need to ask ourselves. What does your proper content system actually look like? And I say my proper content system, but it can also be your content system. Truth is that you need to figure out for yourself how you create that content system, because every company, every person, every type of content has their own specifics. I'll just introduce what we call the controlled scale model. And it's a framework we've built and tested across clients in different sectors and different markets. It's not a tool. It's not a prompt template. It's not a way, but it's really a way of thinking about how content should move through your organization from below to the top or vice versa, from idea to life without losing quality at any stage. So let's break down what our controlled scale model actually looks like. Now for us, the controlled scale model has 4 stages. First stage is the brief. I think everyone knows a brief. Most of you already written out a brief or briefed your agency on an assignment, but everything starts with a correct brief. Then you need to build in the guardrails. Barry, our office dog, he does not care about guardrails. We do. Okay. Third one, that's when you finally arrive at the AI assistant production. But before you start producing content, there's those first 2 steps you first need to take. And then finally, there's the human review. And human review is also very important. But if you skip one of these steps, and the most steps are being skipped are either the guardrails or the human review, that's where the wheels start falling off. So these 4 stages together, they're actually the backbone of everything we do when we help clients scale content with AI. So let's take a look at stage number 1, which is the brief. Now, the main idea here is that the way you write a brief for an AI workflow, it's completely different actually from how you write one for a human creative. So a brief for a human creative, let's call it the traditional brief. This is narrative, it's contextual, it's tone-led. And if there's a bit of ambiguity, that's totally fine because the creatives love ambiguity sometimes. That's their fuel. A brief for an AI workflow needs to be modular. It needs to be variable driven and it needs to be very precise. Ambiguity does not work with AI. It does not fuel the creativity in the machine. It will actually cause failure. And it's up to us to gap that challenge, to go from a traditional brief to the AI brief. Now, for those who don't know what a traditional brief looks like, this is a traditional brief in a nutshell. First off, you mention the client, then you mention the campaign, what's the main deliverable. If it's the first time you're working on this client, you give a bit of background. You tell them what the call to action needs to be, what do we actually want to communicate about this campaign, what's the tone and the feel. Usually there's also a really large style guide with a tone of voice and everything included to take that into consideration. There's probably a couple of must-haves that need to be included in the campaign. And also a couple of what to avoid, of course. If we want to avoid stock photo people, like things like that. And the formats, like this is the tactical part of the campaign. What formats do we need to deliver in the end, and what needs to be spread across all the different platforms? And again, what's the deadline? Well, it's Friday, end of day, that you need to do. So these are the things you usually include in a traditional campaign brief. Now let's take a look to a brief to start working on AI content. This looks completely different, and I know this does not look very sexy at all, but bear with me. What we see here are not the prompts. This is basically the brief for a human colleague. And I say human colleague, and it still sounds weird to me when I need to say it, because I also have a bunch of AI agents who are also my colleagues. They're running in my own team, but this is very much the brief for our human colleagues. But this tells my colleagues how they need to start building their nodes for the job that needs to be done. So I highlighted 3 nodes. If you have never heard of nodes, don't worry. It's something I'll explain to more later on in this presentation. But this basically tells my human colleague how they need to start building their workflow when creating their AI content nodes system. So that's what this looks like. So we always start from this, then we translate it to this, and then we move to the next stage, to the guardrails. And I want to be really direct here. Putting your brand guardrails in a document or just uploading your really incredible, cool looking visual style guides and hoping that AI reads it correctly, that's not a good guardrail strategy, because rules on a page are not enough. For AI to respect your brand consistently and at scale, it needs to be trained on your brand, not just be instructed about it. And there's a meaningful difference between those 2 things, and it shows in the end in the output. Now, how do you do this? Well, the most powerful way to build those brand guardrails for visual AI is through what we call a LoRA model. Now, I know I'm going fast, but you will receive this presentation after this live one as well, so you can look into it a bit more. But what is a LoRA model? Well, LoRA stands for a low-rank adaptation. And in practical terms, it's a fine-tuned AI model that has been trained on a specific set of your brand images, so that it learns your visual style, your aesthetic, your color world, your tone of voice, your brand identity at a really deep level. And once trained, it will start to generate content that really belongs to your brand and will not make as many mistakes as if you just uploaded your brand's style guide, for example. Now, building a LoRA model for your brand is basically a 3-step process. First step is you gather your best existing brand visuals, the ones that really represent your brand and you want more of it, and you feed it into the model. Once that's done, you go to step 2. That's when you start training the model on those images and you fine tune where necessary, because it will need some fine tuning. If you're happy with that, you can move over to step 3, and that's when you start generating and evaluating if the model is producing visuals which are in your specific brand visual language. So this investment is very much front-loaded, but the payback is that every asset you generate will come back afterwards, of course. Now, I made a small experiment I ran for this presentation. And actually, my experiment failed. It failed to the point that I wanted to make you why you need to use LoRa models, but that's also the reason why I wanted to include this, because I started out by asking a model, so not a LoRa model, just a generic OpenAI model, a simple prompt. Create a hand that holds a Coca-Cola bottle and show me some people sitting in the back during the summer. And actually, it pretty much nailed it from the first try without me having to create a specific LoRa model for it. Now, why is this? Because all of the major models, think ChatGPT, think Claude, think Gemini, and so forth, they've all been trained on real-life data. And what is the biggest marketing brand in the world? Probably that's Coca-Cola. So it will make sense that it will generate the image almost correctly, almost immediately. However, and this is where things really start to get interesting, and this is the reason why I also included this in my presentation, I also tried to mess up the image by saying I wanted a different bottle shape, I wanted a different color of liquids, and I wanted a different color of their red label. And after 10 tries, I gave up because it simply refused to do it. So I don't know if you can see it, but only the red label changed slightly. Now, why is this? That's because the model has their preferences, which they've been trained on. So even if I was from Coca-Cola and we did reshape our bottle, the generic AI model, this one is from OpenAI, it wouldn't let me. And that's why you need to have LoRa models to make sure you have absolute control. So in this case, it was actually kind of positive, unless you're a brand manager for Coca-Cola and you just released a new bottle type, then AI just says no, computer says no. And then you're out of luck. So that's why you need to train LoRa models, so you have the full absolute control over it. Stage 3, and that's when we start moving into the AI assistant production part. This is where you have one idea, one set of rules, and you can start generating an infinite controlled variation. So this is a creative system built on your solid brief, built with proper guardrails, which in turns a single campaign into repeatable, reusable formats. So you don't need to start from zero for every adaptation. You build the system once, and then you can use it and reuse it along you go. So I brought an example with me. This is a master campaign visual for an Audi Q4. It's just one image. Normally on the left, you have the Audi logo, all the legal text, a line of copy, things like that. And from this, every format, every variant, every localization derives from this single asset. So we've created the LoRa model. We used all of the images we had from the Q4, and then we started creating our content production. So from that master visual, we created a social post, we created a story on a reel format, we created a video thumbnail. Each one was adapted for its specific platform, format, context, different proportions, different focal points, different crop logic, but all unmistakably from the same campaign. And this is what controlled variation actually looks like. In my use cases, I will delve a bit deeper into this. We did it for Skoda as well. Then I will show you how we did actually do this. Stage 4, final stage, that's a human control point. And this is the stage that AI enthusiasts will want to skip and brand managers desperately want to keep, in my experience. Here's my honest position. I think AI handles the production volume. What it cannot handle is the creative direction, is the brand fit, is the emotional nuance, it's the factual accuracy, it's the final approval. These are still very much human decisions. Will this be the same case 1 year from now? I don't know. Let's find it out together. But for me, these are currently still human decisions. So the goal of this workflow is not to remove humans from the process. It's to ensure that humans are involved at the moment that actually requires them. So those are the 4 stages that you need to do before you can really start producing your content. Now, if you do this correctly, what becomes possible when you build a system like this? Well, you can have more creative directions explored before you commit any budget, because generating 5 visuals, it takes hours, not weeks anymore. You can have fresher content without rebuilding from scratch, because your templates, they can carry the work forward. You can have faster adaptation times across markets and audiences. This is a very powerful tool for that. And you need to spend less time on repetitive work, so you can invest more time on decisions that matter, that generally require human creative intelligence. So that's basically the outcome which you will reach once you have introduced the 4 stages of the model. If you put it all together, this is what the optimal content production process looks like. It's It's the briefing, it's the master creation, then you move to automated scaling, approval process, then you can start translating and localizing things, then you move on to the publication part and across all the different platforms, websites, email, TikTok, Google, digital out of home, and so forth. Then you start optimizing it via analytics, heat maps, whatever you need. And those learnings will need to feed back again in the next cycle. Ideally, also that is also automated with one of our AI systems. So you never need to start from basics, from zero, and everything is backed up by the data, so you can start again with a new campaign. And this optimal production process only starts if you really start with a build brief at the beginning of these slides. So that was very quickly, in a nutshell, very theoretically, sorry about that, about the problem and how you can solve it by implementing the correct content workflow. I showed you our content workflow. You need to decide for yourself what it looks like for you, for your organization. But just know that there's a lot of steps, thought process steps, strategic steps you need to take before you start actually producing the content. So enough theory, and let's look at the real work. Well, I have 3 use cases with me. They're all built on the system we just walked through. So I have an example of localization of campaign assets for Skoda. I also brought with me some motion content, which we created from statical photography to create more impact on social media. And I've also included an example of what an owned product image library might look like when you do it without having a traditional photo shoot. So this is the type of photography that ends up in your own digital asset management system. So let's see what this actually produces. Now, before I start showing you the things, I want to take a quick dive into the tool stack we use for these workflows, because everything is built around IO Bonsai. IO Bonsai, if you don't know, is our own AI platform. And we connect this to N8N for all of our workflow automation. So N8N is included within our own IO Bonsai platform. And then we start using Crea, which is a platform, and Figma for all of our design output and format management. Now, these tools, they all communicate through automated pipelines. That's what I mean with it's not about the tools you use, it's about the automation, the workflow you need to use. Everything starts from IO Bonsai, then it moves through N8N, Crea, and Figma, and then it moves back again to IO Bonsai for the final files. The system here does all of the repetitive work, but the humans are still very much in the director's seat. They direct it. I think an important part here is that everything starts from Bonsai, and this is partly for control, but also very much for IP purposes. Having clear ownership, making sure that your data stays with you, etc., and all those things. If you just use any AI platform or any AI wrapper platform, you can be virtually sure that your input will be used to train the model's data. I know there are subscriptions that say otherwise. I believe them because I'm an optimistic person, but the safest way is by just having everything within your own platform, everything hosted yourself within Europe. That's the way we prefer to work at IO. Now, I talked about nodes a couple of slides before. If you don't know what nodes is, I'm just going to show you a quick video. What a node basically does is it connects all of the different, let's call it layers within an image to create one larger image. So usually when you prompt an image via the recognizable or the classic platforms, like let's say OpenAI, you get a flat image. What we do with nodes is we pull those apart. So we have an image for the background. We have one for the foreground, for the characters, for the people, for the product, for the logo, things like that, for the copy. We do this spread over several platforms. We do this within Crea, within Figma, and perhaps some other platforms as well. That's to maintain absolute control, but also that way we are not limiting ourselves to one specific model, AI model, and we can use the AI model which works best for its specific purpose. So that's what nodes kind of are. I'm just going to show you a video. It might make a bit more sense when I show it to you. So what you just saw was like nodes getting connected to each other, getting drawn to each other. It's something we'll be focusing on in my first use case, which is localization content. So this is probably one of the most time-consuming, expensive, and also error-prone parts of content production for any brand operating across multiple markets. You have one campaign, and you need to feel it local. It needs to be in setting, it needs to be in context, there needs to be cultural relevance without rebuilding everything from scratch for every market. For me, this is exactly the kind of problem AI solves well when you set up the content workflow system correctly. So let's start with Skoda. So the brief here was pretty basic. I want you to produce a large number of localized campaign visuals for the Skoda Karoq in different formats across different regional settings in Belgium. Now, the challenge is avoid fragile one-off template approach that breaks every time a small change is needed. And we started by using the official model images from Skoda's own DAM platform, which are the images you see right now. Those are 4 views of the car. It's clean, it's neutral, and these become the raw material for everything that follows. We can also start by using 3D models. That will give us even more freedom and more able to control things, but I just want to show you that it's not necessary. We can also start by using just some product shots of the image shots of the product. Now, before we start localizing anything, we need to have a consistent visual reference for the car itself. So the first step in the workflow is creating what we call a character sheet, which is a single composite image showing the Karoq from all of the angles, like 3/4, back, front, 3/4 back. And this sheet very much becomes our, what we call, visual source of truth. Every localized image we generate references this sheet. And this is how we can maintain the consistency across every variation, which I will about to show you. On the left side, you will always see the result. On the right side, you will see the workflow system built in place. This is one very large workflow. Just keep in mind that if you do this properly, you will only need to adjust one prompt at the beginning, and it will generate all of the output at the end automatically. But of course, it takes time, effort, and experience, not only in AI, but also in content production, to know what a good end result is and what not, of course, because that stays the same. AI can't decide that. Now, localization 1 is the Ardennes, because the Karoq is an SUV, it's a 4x4, I don't know, it's built to ride in the cross country, that's what they make us believe. Anyway, we use the reference photo of the Bois de la Paix in Bastogne, which is a real landscape, which has a real atmosphere, and we combine that location reference with the character from the character sheet. And we prompt the first localized key visual. So the car is recognizably the same car. The setting is distinctly and unmistakably Belgian, can also be the north of France or perhaps Limburg in Netherlands. But we didn't need to physically drive the Skoda to the Ardennes, park it in a forest, pay a photographer, pay a crew, lunch, catering, and so forth and so forth. That matters considerably when you're doing at this scale. Do I still believe in real photo shoots? Definitely. I really still believe it. The only thing is, if you know that afterwards you need to have tons of photos, I think this would be a better starting point. Localization 2 is Herentals. Why Herentals? Don't ask me. We just picked a typical Belgian Flemish village. So we used a new reference image, an autumn street scene with cobblestones. It's typical Flemish architecture, but we also added some golden lights because the reference photo was a bit too clean. But again, same character sheet, same pipeline, different location, different atmosphere, different output. And the key visual now feels grounded in a specific recognizable local context. Why do we do this, by the way? Because from research, we found out that the average Skoda buyer is actually 50 plus. And a Skoda parked in front of a really cool, impressive Dubai building does not really resonate as much with our target audience as we like to believe. So that's why we started using these local settings, which are very recognizable. But that's the whole point of the localization, and they're just not translating the copy, but making the visual world feel like it belongs to the audience who you're talking to. On the right, again, you can see the different nodes connected to each other, how we built this. Third one is the North Sea coast. For this one, we didn't use a reference photo. We used a written description, just the coast of Ostende in the winter, and we fed it directly into the prompt, and the model generated the landscape from that description. You see the Kodak Karoq appears driving along the coastline. The Ostend skyline, yeah, is visible in the background. I've never seen it so dramatic when it comes to weather in Ostend, but that's just part of the experience, of course. And this one really impressed our team the first time we ran it, because, yeah, it took about as long as writing this prompt as I just did about telling it. So also because we didn't start from a reference image, this was a really cool thing that allowed us to go even more creative in things like that. Fourth localization is a lifestyle scene with snow. Again, in the Ardennes, I know we only receive 2 weeks of snow a year, but let's just say we picked the right date. You can see people loading ski gear from the boot of the car, a snowy forest, golden winter light, things like that. We also added a reference image of the Karoq's boot, and that wasn't in our original character sheet, so we added a new one. Specifically to avoid hallucinations. And hallucinations, that's when AI invents details that weren't in the brief or in the prompt. And adding the boot reference keeps the interior details accurate and the brand integrity intact. So it's a small addition, but it can have a significant difference in output quality. Of course, it's something that would require a full new photo shoot. We can easily swap colors from the car, so it's a color variant. Same snowy lifestyle scene, same composition, same car, but now in blue. We added the color reference image of the blue Karoq to the prompt, and the model adapted the entire scene around it. So again, same setting, same people, same ski gear, but a different car done. And this is what I absolutely mean with, okay, controlled variation at the format level. This is what it looks like in practice. Now, once you're given the assignment to create all of these different lifestyle scenes, and once you have the key visuals, the next step is adapting them to the required formats in 916, 960 by 1200, 1200 by 1200 square, and so forth. So the system automatically reframes, resizes, and crops intelligently for each format to make sure that the car maintains the focal point of the image. So we don't have to do any manual cropping. We don't have to move any logo whatsoever. Everything is done manually and is part of our entire content workflow, which is being created by all of these different nodes. So here's a total output from this workflow. We have 4 different local settings. We have 1 color variant, each exported in 4 formats. So that's 20 primary assets plus all of the additional format declinations, all built from 1 basic workflow and 1 character sheet and a set of well-built localization prompts. Again, looks very simple, but you need the experience, of course, to start building this, and you need to have the keen eye as well to make sure that the content is actually really great. So it's not only a lot of output, a lot of correct output, but also really great looking output. Now, we did a couple of other things as well. It doesn't stop at exterior shots. The same approach also works for interior imagery, for example, or you can put a car in a studio setting instead of moving it outside. And you also can start to become a bit more creative by having these creative visual techniques, split screen combos, 2 different environments, Ardennes Forest, North Sea coast. But as you can see, the car is still very much correct. The shadows are correct. Yeah, this looks more like a campaign decision, but it's actually a pipeline parameter, which we also prompted. So that's, for me, a really great example of how you can use your AI content workflow to start creating these localization assets. Second example I want to show you is how we create motion from existing assets. It's one of the most consistent requests we actually receive from clients. It's like we have this great photography, but we need video. Why? Because video draws more attention on social media, of course. So traditionally, that means either a new production shoot, starting from scratch, or you need to do some really expensive post-production animation work, which again, it still has its place. But not in this type of content. This type of content, we didn't used to do it in the past. Now the AI content workflows allow us to do this. So let's take a look at what it actually produces. These are 3 images we received from one of our clients, from a property developer. I think they're beautiful stills. It's the kind of visuals that live on a website or in a sales brochure. Good content, but very much static. And we used it to create a motion video. Now, this is just a video I'm about to show you. Of course, in the end, it needs a call to action, a line of copy, the logo, website, things like that. But this is what we created from these 3 visuals. This, of course, still needs some manual work to stitch all the images together, all the moving images together. This is, of course, not real world. It shouts that it's a 3D render, but that was also the point. We started from a 3D render and we made it movable. So that's one of the things we are doing a lot these days, and which is very much possible if you want to look into it, if you start with the correct content workflow and then you start creating the nodes. The third use case, our own brand image libraries. So here's a problem most brand managers know very well. You need imagery. You need lots of imagery across different contexts, different moods, different product angles. And stock photography, yeah, that's generic. That's why it's stock photography. And your competitors are also using the same library. A dedicated photo shoot is expensive and takes time to plan. Again, I still think it's valuable, but if you just want to move that, I don't know, product slightly bit more to the right or to the left, you need to start shooting again from scratch. So once it's done, you have what you have until the next brief and the next budget cycle. So our AI content workflows can change that equation significantly. So let's take a look at some cookies. So we started the same way as we started with the car, again, by starting a character sheet using existing product photography. So a biscuit shot from several angles. We created a reference composite, front view, back view, side view, 3/4 perspective, things like that. Again, it's our character sheet, like I also showed you in the Skoda case. What we then do is from the character sheet, we can generate functional product images with full control over every photographic variable, lighting angle, contrast, camera lens, zoom level, background texture, depth of field, macro close-up shots, zooming out a little bit. So yeah, if you need a different angle, a different lighting, a different surface texture for a seasonal campaign, I don't know, you can just change the prompt and there's no reshooting required. Then before committing to actual content production, we use a character sheet to generate a couple of mood boards. So a range of visual directions, context, moods to choose from. You can have coffee with biscuits on a rustic table. You can have a chocolate dip. You can have them stacked. You can have a cozy morning moment. So these mood boards are really a fast way to produce, and they give you a creative team like a visual menu before any real budget is committed. And the output here is inspiration and direction. It's not finalized content yet, but it's just to get the creative juices flowing and think about, okay, now we can start writing our AI brief. What is actually the deliverable we need to have? So more mood board territory and more. So from mood boards, we can go to campaign-ready assets. So for example, a floating biscuit with some crumbs scatter, or like a micro cross section revealing the interior texture, or a flat lay with some caneel, anise, I don't know how you say it, cinnamon sticks. So there's no longer concepts. This is very much usable images you can start using in your production. So if we show some more from the library, again, broken biscuit revealing against a marble surface. If you can think of it, you can actually prompt it. And there we have some showstoppers. So a dramatic stacked composition of falling crumbs, biscuits, dark background, theatrical lighting. Yeah, these are the kind of images that exist because of the character sheet we created in the beginning and because of the well-built workflows again. We can take the exact same approach to product line extensions. So the biscuit brand also produces a spread. And from those product references, we can build new assets, a jar, for example. Or we go into the recipe territory. Let's create a cheesecake with crumble topping, things like that. So everything is generated, everything is consistent, and everything is also owned by the client. And then we have a final sweep through the library. For example, a top-down flat with cinnamon again. Or like more of a morning setting, table setting. So the next step, what actually would be in this process, is that we start automating everything right from your own DAM, from your own digital asset management system. That's a completely different webinar, but that's also the future. So it might be interesting to set something up from this as well, because our view on this is that in the future, we will have no longer pre-made asset management systems, but we will have asset management systems created on your own LoRa with your own workflows, and you can start prompting whatever you need, and it will appear right in your DAM. But again, totally different type of webinar. I have 15 minutes left, so apologies if I went a bit too quickly to it. I want to talk a little bit about the people, because everything I've shown, the systems, the workflow, the output, it only works if you have the right people who are running it. So let's talk about what actually means for how you need to build and develop yourself or your creative team starting from here. And the conversation about AI and the creative teams tends to go one of each ways. So it's either going to be AI is going to replace everyone, which makes a great headline, but isn't particularly useful, or AI will change nothing, which is basically wrong. I think the truth is much more interesting than either of those two. And that is that AI changes what content teams spend their time on. It's not whether creative people are needed, but which creative skills become more valuable and which ones get absorbed by the machine. And those are two different very questions. I think for most of marketing history, and we're talking from the Madman era all the way through about 3, 4, 5 years ago, the creative constraint was capacity. Right? Not enough time, not enough budget, most of the time not enough budget, and not enough hands to produce everything the campaign actually needed. So if you had a generally great idea, but not enough resources to execute it across every format and every market, the idea got smaller or the budget got smaller. So the capacity ceiling, was actually also sometimes a creative ceiling, and that was just the reality of our industry. So AI removes that constraint. Production capacity is no longer the bottleneck. You can produce more content in more formats for more markets with the same team as before. But it raises a much more, I think, interesting and more urgent question. And I refer back to one of my first slides. If volume is no longer the real problem, if capacity is no longer the ceiling, then what actually determines the quality and strategic value of your content operation? That question changes everything about how you think about your own team. So here's a very simple framework. We have two axes, volume and quality. And we have 4 quadrants. We have low volume and low quality. That's not where anyone wants to be. Then we have high volume and low quality. That's where most brands end up when they start using AI without a proper system. Then we have low volume but high quality. That's where most serious brands live today if they put something live. And then we have high volume, high quality. That's the quadrant that's been theoretically possible, but practically out of reach for the most teams. And that's until now, because AI makes the top right, according to us, achievable, but only, again, if you use the you build a system to actually use it. Now, without a system, if you don't move to the top right, you slide to the bottom left. You have low volume, low quality, which is simply irrelevant. You can have high volume, low quality, which is what we call like this. That's just noise. Then you have low volume, high quality, which is actually just being underused. And where you want to end up is the high volume, high quality, of course. Now, the risk when brands add AI without thinking is not becoming better. It's becoming louder and less coherent. So what does a team that does this properly, what will they look like? What changes, what stays the same, what needs to become more valuable than it's ever been? So I have about 6 core creative roles currently in my team. I want to show you the before and after view of it, and what each one looks like when they start making the shift towards the more AI-infused type of site. This is, of course, from my team. It can be different from yours team, but let's go through it. For me, the copywriter, they really become the content AI experts. They're training brand voice models, they're writing briefs, they're creating the guidelines that direct the AI outputs. We also have the designers. They become more graphic directors. They need to define the visual system and they need to create the output rather than manually build every asset. We have social media managers who become really platform strategists. They can focus on the performance logic and content planning rather than scheduling everything and doing everything manually. We have video editors who become much more motion directors. We have content managers, and they become content operation leads. They own the workflow, which I presented to you. They own the templates, and they need to guard the quality checkpoints. And then we have the art director, or more the creative concepting type of person. They become really brand curators. They are the guardians of the visual consistency. They are the person who decides what fits and what doesn't. So for me, these are skills that survive and grow in value. And those are the ones that AI cannot replicate for me at this moment. It's judgment, it's taste, it's strategic thinking, it's brand intuition, and so forth and so forth. What we are seeing is that they do not become less important. They are really becoming everything, but only, again, if you have the proper content workflow installed. We're coming to the end. But before I wrap it up, I want to leave you with a small thought exercise. Remember, I said there's only a couple of slides you really need to remember when you step out of this webinar. This is one of them. These are 3 questions that if you ask yourself honestly and ask your organization honestly, they will tell you exactly where to start and what to do first. So the question number 1 is, where are your most experienced people spending time on work that doesn't need them? If your best copywriter is spending half their week rewriting assets or writing or shortening text and things like that and swapping headlines into templates, that's a system problem. And that's something you can absolutely solve by using the AI content workflow. Question 2 is, where do we spend the most time on decisions that a better system could make for us? And I'm talking about format sizing, basic copy adaptations, version management. These should not require senior creative attention. And question number 3, and I just noticed that my numbering is off, but whatever, this is question number 3. If volume is no longer the constraint, what will we do with the time and budget we get back? And I think that last question is the most exciting one I can ask you in this virtual room, because there's so many amazing things you can now start doing with the budget you left over. You can start making work that creates more impact. You can think much longer about the work you're creating. You can do some more research about your target audience, things like that. So these are 3 questions which I really want you to take back and take it as a start point, and then from there on start building your entire content workflow. So I hope this has given you a few ideas about how to answer it and how you need to rethink your process before starting with AI content. Now, before I leave you, if today has sparked any questions, you want to explore more in depth about AI strategy, marketing technology, data infrastructure, content operations, come and join us at our next Control Shift Live event. There's 3 events in Belgium next week. It's in Antwerp on the 9th, it's in Herentals on the 10th, and it's in Ghent on the 11th. You can find all of the details on our website, and it's completely free. We'll be bringing together 5 IO colleagues who will talk about how we can use AI for your business. And we have our very sympathetic and knowledgeable country director, Jerry, who will moderate the entire thing. So that's a wrap. I want to thank you for spending this time with me today. If anything we covered connects with you, or you have a challenge where you're currently working on, whether it's localization problems, production workflow, team structure questions, or you're just trying to figure out, I don't know, how to start with AI in your content operation, I genuinely love to hear it. I have some time to answer any questions if there are any. Otherwise, drop me a message. My email address is in the top right corner, where you can find me on LinkedIn, and you can find everything again on iodigital.com. Thank you very much, and hopefully see you soon. Are there any questions? Let's check. Are these images high res? Sophie asks. Yes, they can be used to imprint. We have systems in place for that. You can use these systems as well, but it's very much definitely possible these days to have images in 300 dpi at a minimum. If you're talking about really large out of homes, like blow up posters, things like that, it might become a bit different, but for smaller print work, it's definitely possible. Gilles asked me, maybe I've missed it, but which AI creating tool or model are you using to create these images? Well, that harks back to one of my first slides. It's not really about the tools you use. It's really about the model, the content workflow. Why? Because every model has their own preferences and their own expertise. For example, Nano Banana from Google is really great for character models, things like that. But I wouldn't use it per se when it comes to more creative type of work. So you need to figure out for yourself, basically, what is my product? What is the message I want to convey? What is the layout, the look I want to have? And start looking and mixing different models. And that's why you work with workflow, so you can combine all those different models into one image. Voila, and I think those were the questions being asked. Again, if you have any more questions, my email is in the top right corner. Reach me out, and I will leave you with this today. Oh, wait, another question, Eva. Is there a difference when focusing mostly on written content versus the visual content? No, and I can be very clear in that, because as you all probably experienced, if you ask, let's say OpenAI, let's say ChatGPT, if you ask ChatGPT, okay, write me a landing page about this product or this event or whatever, it will produce a very generic type of text, which will not perform well in an SEO, GEO context. So you definitely need to train LoRa models with text as well, definitely. Figma Weave is indeed a great example, Gilles, of nodes, and it's the same, yeah. So that's what we use in our product as well, in our workflow, yeah. Weave was, by the way, a standalone company, and Figma recently acquired it, so that's why. Let's see. All right. If those were the questions, I want to thank you again very much, and I hope to see you at our event next week. All of the details are in the chat Jasna just posted. Thank you very much.